On the Roman Catholic religion, Johnson said, if you join the papists externally, they will not interrogate you strictly as to your belief in their tenets. No reasoning papist believes every article of their faith. There is one side in which a good man might be persuaded to embrace it. A good man, of a timorous disposition, in great doubts of his acceptance with God, and pretty credulous, might be glad to be of a church where there are so many helps to get to heaven. I would be a papist if I could. I have fear enough, but an obstinate rationality prevents me. I shall never be a papist unless on the near approach of death, of which I have a very great terror. I wonder that women are not all papists, I said. They are not more afraid of death than men are, Johnson said, because they are less wicked. Dr. Adams said, they are more pious. And Johnson said, no, hang 'em, they are not more pious. A wicked fellow is the most pious when he takes to it. He'll beat you all at piety. Johnson argued in defense of some of the peculiar tenets of the Church of Rome. As to the giving the bread only to the laity, he said, they may think that in what is merely ritual, deviations from the primitive mode may be admitted on the ground of convenience, and I think they are as well warranted to make this alteration as we are to substitute sprinkling in the room of the ancient baptism. As to the invocation of saints, he said, though I do not think it authorized, it appears to me that the communion of saints in the Creed means the communion with the saints in heaven as connected with the Holy Catholic Church. Oh, God. Okay, there's a long footnote now. Oh, no. This one's not so long. There's a longer one after that. Walter, in his Divine Poeses, Canto First, has the same thought finally expressed. The church triumphant and the church below, in songs of praise, their present union show. Their joys are full, our expectation long. In life we defer, but we join in song. Angels and we, assisted by this art, may sing together, though we dwell apart. Johnson admitted the influence of evil spirits upon our minds and said, nobody who believes the New Testament can deny it. I brought a volume of Dr. Hurd, the Bishop of Worcester's sermons, and read to the company some passages from one of them upon this text. Resist the devil, and he will fly from you. James 4:7. I was happy to produce so judicious and elegant a supporter of a doctrine which, I know not why, should, in this world of imperfect knowledge, and therefore of wonder and mystery in 1,000 instances, be contested by some with an unthinking assurance and flippancy. Now that longer footnote. The sermon thus opens, that there are angels and spirits, good and bad, that at the head of these last there is one more considerable and malignant than the rest, who, in the form or under the name of a serpent, was deeply concerned with the fall of man, and whose head, as the prophetic language is, the Son of Man was one day to bruise. That this evil spirit, though that prophecy be in part completed, has not yet received his death's wound, but is still permitted for ends unsearchable to us, and in ways which we cannot particularly explain, to have a certain degree of power in this world hostile to its virtues and happiness, and sometimes exerted with too much success. All this is so clear from Scripture that no believer, unless he be, first of all, spoiled by philosophy and vain deceit, quote Colossians 2:8, can possibly entertain a doubt of it. Having treated of possessions, his lordship says, as I have no authority to affirm that there are now any such, so neither may I presume to say with confidence that there are not any. But then with regard to the influence of evil spirits at this day upon the souls of men, I shall take leave to be a great deal more peremptory. Then, having stated the various proofs, he adds, all this I say is so manifest to everyone who reads the scriptures that if we respect their authority, the question concerning the reality of the demonic influence upon the minds of men is clearly determined. Let it be remembered that these are not the words of an antiquated or obscure enthusiast, but of a learned and polite prelate now alive, and were spoken not to a vulgar congregation, but to the Honorable Society of Lincoln's Inn. His lordship in the sermon explains the words, "Deliver us from evil" in the Lord's Prayer as signifying a request to be protected from the evil one, that is, the devil. This is well illustrated in a short but excellent commentary by my late worthy friend, the Reverend Dr. Lort, of whom it may truly be said, "Multus ea bonis flebilis accidit." He died mournful by many good men. He died mourned by many good men. It is remarkable that Waller, in his reflections on the several petitions in that sacred form of devotion, has understood this in the same sense. Guard us from all temptation of the foe. After dinner, when one of us talked of there being a great enmity between Whig and Tory, Johnson said, "Why not so much, I think, unless when they come into competition with each other. There is none when they are only common acquaintance, none when they are of different sexes. A Tory will marry into a Whig family, and a Whig into a Tory family without any reluctance. But indeed, in a matter of much more concern than political tenets, and that is religion, men and women do not concern themselves much about differences of opinion. And ladies set no value on the moral character of men who pay their addresses to them. The greatest profligate will be as well received as the men of the greatest virtue, and this by a very good woman, by a woman who says her prayers 3 times a day." Our ladies endeavored to defend their sex from this charge, but he roared them down. No, no, no. A lady will take Jonathan Wild as readily as St. Austin if he has 3 pence more, and what is worse, her parents will give her to him. Women have a perpetual envy of our vices. They are less vicious than we, not from choice, but because we restrict them. They are the slaves of order and fashion. Their virtue is of more consequence to us than our own, so far as concerns this world. Miss Adams mentioned a gentleman of licentious character, and said, "Suppose I had a mind to marry that gentleman. Would my parents consent?" Johnson said, "Yes, they'd consent, and you'd go. You'd go though they did not consent." Miss Adams said, "Perhaps their opposing might make me go." Johnson said, "Oh, very well. You'd take one whom you think a bad man to have the pleasure of vexing your parents. You put me in mind of Dr. Barrowby, the physician, who was very fond of swine's flesh. One day, when he was eating it, he said, 'I wish I was a Jew.' 'Why so?' said somebody. 'The Jews are not allowed to eat your favorite meat.' 'Because,' said he, 'I should then have the gust of eating it, with the pleasure of sitting.'" Johnson then proceeded in his declamation. Miss Adams soon afterwards made an observation that I do not recollect, which pleased him much. He said with a good-humored smile, "That there should be so much excellence united with so much depravity is strange." Indeed, this lady's good qualities, merit, and accomplishments, and her constant attention to Dr. Johnson were not lost upon him. She happened to tell him that a little coffee pot, in which he had made his coffee, was the only thing she could call her own. He turned to her with a complacent gallantry. "Don't say so, my dear. I hope you don't reckon my heart as nothing." Oh, he's so smooth. I asked him if it was true, as reported, that he had said lately, "I am for the king against Fox, but I am for Fox against Pitt." Johnson said, "Yes, sir, the king is my master, but I do not know Pitt, and Fox is my friend." "Fox," added he, is a most extraordinary man. Here is a man, describing him in strong terms of objection in some respects, according as he apprehended, but which exalted his abilities the more, who has divided the kingdom with Caesar, so that it was a doubt whether the nation should be ruled by the scepter of George III or the tongue of Fox. Dr. Wall, physician at Oxford, drank tea with us. Johnson had, in general, a peculiar pleasure in the company of physicians, which was certainly not abated by the conversation of this learned, ingenious, and pleasing gentleman. Johnson said, "It is wonderful how little good Radcliffe's traveling fellowships have done. I know nothing that has been imported by them. Yet many additions to our medical knowledge might be got in foreign countries. Inoculation, for instance, has saved more lives than war destroys, and the cures performed by the Peruvian bark are innumerable. But it is in vain to send our traveling physicians to France and Italy and Germany, for all that is known there is known here. I'd send them out of Christendom. I'd send them among barbarous nations." On Friday, June 11th, we talked at breakfast of forms of prayer. Johnson said, "I know of no good prayers but those in the Book of Common Prayer." Dr. Adams, in a very earnest manner, said, "I was sure you would compose some family prayers." Johnson said, "I will not compose prayers for you, sir, because you can do it for yourself. But I have thought of getting together all the books of prayers which I could, selecting those which should appear to me the best, putting out some, inserting others, adding some prayers of my own, and prefixing a discourse on prayer." We all now gathered about him, and 2 or 3 of us at a time joined in pressing him to execute this plan. He seemed to be a little displeased at the manner of our importunity, and in great agitation called out, "Do not talk thus of what is so awful. I know not what time God will allow me in this world. There are many things which I wish to do." Some of us persisted, and Dr. Adams said, "I never was more serious about anything in my life." Johnson said, let me alone. I am overpowered." And then he put his hands before his face and reclined for some time upon the table. I mentioned Jeremy Taylor's using, in his forms of prayer, "I am the chief of sinners," and other such self-condemning expressions. "Now," said I, "this cannot be said with truth by every man, and therefore is improper for a general printed form. I myself cannot say that I am the worst of men. I will not say so." Johnson answered, "A man may know that physically, that is, in the real state of things, he is not the worst man, but that morally, he may be so. Law observes that every man knows something worse of himself than he is sure of in others. You may not have committed such crimes as some men have done, but you do not know against what degree of light they have sinned. Besides, sir, the chief of sinners is a mode of expression for I am a great sinner. So St. Paul, speaking of our Savior's having died to save sinners, says, of whom I am the chief. Yet he certainly did not think himself so bad as Judas Iscariot. I said, but Sir Taylor means it literally, for he founds a conceit upon it. When praying for the conversion of sinners, and of himself in particular, he says, Lord, thou wilt not leave thy chief work undone. Johnson answered, I do not approve of figurative expressions in addressing the Supreme Being, and I never use them. Taylor gives a very good advice. Never lie in your prayers. Never confess more than you really believe. Never promise more than you mean to perform. I recollect this precept in his Golden Grove, but his example for prayer contradicts his precept. Dr. Johnson and I went in Dr. Adams' coach to dine with Dr. Noel, principal of St. Mary Hall, at his beautiful villa in Ifley, on the banks of the Isis, about 2 miles from Oxford. Isis? I don't know. While we were upon the road, I had the resolution to ask Johnson whether he thought that the roughness of his manner had been an advantage or not, and if he would not have done more good if he had been more gentle. I proceeded to answer myself thus: perhaps it has been of advantage, as it has given weight to what you said. You could not perhaps have talked with such authority without it. Johnson said, No, sir, I have done more good as I am. Obscenity and impiety have always been repressed in my company. I said, True, sir, and that is more than can be said of every bishop. Greater liberties have been taken in the presence of a bishop, though a very good man, from his being milder and therefore not commanding such awe. Yet, sir, many people who might have been benefited by your conversation have been frightened away. A worthy friend of ours has told me that he was often been afraid to talk to you. Johnson said, Sir, he need not have been afraid if he had anything rational to say. If he had not, it was better he did not talk. Dr. Nowell is celebrated for having preached a sermon before the House of Commons on the 30th of January, 1772, full of high Tory sentiments, for which he was thanked as usual, and printed it at their request. But in the midst of the turbulence and faction which disregarded part of the present reign, the thanks were afterwards ordered to be expunged. This strange conduct sufficiently exposed itself, and Dr. Nowell will ever have the honor which is due to a lofty friend of our monarchical constitution. Dr. Johnson said to me, Sir, the court will be very much to blame if he is not promoted. I told this to Dr. Nowell, and asserting my humbler, though not less zealous exertions in the same cause, I suggested that whether return we might receive, we should still have the consolation of being like Butler's steady and generous royalist, true to the dial to the sun, true as the dial to the sun, although it be not shone upon. We were well entertained and very happy at Dr. Nowell's, where was a very agreeable company, and we drank church and king after dinner with true Tory cordiality. We talked of a certain clergyman, the Reverend Sir Henry Bate Dudley, of extraordinary character, who by exerting his talents in writing on temporary topics and displaying uncommon intrepidity, had raised himself to affluence. I maintain that we ought not to be indignant at his success, for merit of every sort was entitled to reward. Johnson said, Sir, I will not allow this man to have merit. No, sir, what he has is rather the contrary. I will indeed allow him courage, and on this account we so far give him credit. We have more respect for a man who robs boldly on the highway than for a fellow who jumps out of a ditch and knocks you down behind your back. Courage is a quality so necessary for maintaining virtue that it is always respected even when it is associated with vice. I censored the coarse invectives which were become fashionable in the House of Commons, and said that if members of Parliament must attack each other personally in the heart of debate, it should be done more genteelly. Johnson said, No, sir, that would be much worse. Abuse is not so dangerous when there is no vehicle of wit or delicacy, no subtle conveyance. The difference between coarse and refined abuse is as the difference between being bruised by a club and wounded by a poisoned arrow. I have since observed his position elegantly expressed by Dr. Young. As the soft plume gives swiftness to the dart, good breeding sends the satire to the heart. Well, that's all for today. Till next time, bye from Boswell.